Good morning, everyone. I'm Arizona Attorney General Kris Mayes. This morning, my office has filed a lawsuit to stop the federal government from opening an immigration detention facility in Surprise, Arizona. A facility they purchased without public input, without community consultation, and apparently without conducting the environmental reviews the law requires, or fully considering the impact such a facility would have on the surrounding area. The federal government did not ask the people of Surprise whether they wanted this. They did not ask the parents of the students that attend any of the schools near this site if they were okay with this. They did not ask the firefighters and paramedics who would be the first to respond if something went wrong, if this was a good idea. They did not ask whether the water and wastewater and power infrastructure of this community could support a detention facility the size of 7 football fields. They just bought a warehouse for $70 million, handed a $300 million contract to a private company called Gardaworld, and told Surprise to deal with it. In their rush to expand detention capacity across the country and implement a deportation system that operates, quote, like Amazon Prime, but with human beings, DHS and ICE have run roughshod over federal law. In February, my office sent a letter to then Secretary Kristi Noem demanding answers. She ignored it. Republicans and Democrats in Congress alike have sent letters also demanding answers. The response has been slow, evasive, incomplete, and not at all as transparent as it should be. The people of Surprise deserve better than that. Before I get into the details of today's lawsuit, I want to make sure you understand what is already happening inside ICE detention facilities in this state. People are dying. A man named Emmanuel Damas, a 56-year-old asylum seeker from Haiti, developed a tooth infection while held in ICE custody in Arizona. He reported his toothache to staff on February 12th. For nearly 2 weeks, he received nothing but ibuprofen. His fellow detainees watched him deteriorate. His face swelled to the size of a potato. He stopped being able to speak at all. He couldn't walk. A fellow detainee reported hearing staff laugh and say that he was faking it as he cried out in pain. Emmanuel Damas died of complications from his tooth infection on March 2nd. He is not alone. At the Eloy Detention Center, a cancer patient, Yari Marquez, ran out of her leukemia medication and has not received the care she needs. A report by DHS's own Office of Inspector General detailed a pattern of abuse of detainees by ICE staff. Those who complained were punished with lengthy periods segregated from their fellow detainees. Those who were segregated reported being denied access to clean bedding, clothing, and had legal materials denied to them. Representatives Stanton, Ansari, and Grijalva recently visited Eloy to conduct congressional oversight. They described detainees forced to march in the desert heat for hours until people fainted. They witnessed detainees in moldy cells. They were told that staff deliberately turned off air conditioning, then later blasted cold air to make people sick. And they reportedly told detainees as they suffered, this is the ICE officials, they reportedly told detainees as they suffered that all of this was, quote, the price of the American dream. Deaths in ICE custody have tripled in the last year. 46 people have died in federal immigration detention since January 2025. That is what ICE detention looks like in Arizona and across the country today. And now they want to bring it next to a residential community in Surprise, close to schools, in the middle of a community that was never asked and never consented. And during the course of our research for this lawsuit, we discovered something that should alarm every single resident of the Northwest Valley. Directly across the street, I guess that's here, from the planned detention center, is a hazardous chemical storage facility operated by a company called Rincom. This warehouse here stores chemicals at levels that trigger federal risk management plan requirements under the Clean Air Act. Let this sink in. The federal government wants to open a jail inside a documented chemical hazard zone. We're talking some of the most hazardous chemicals regulated by the federal government. Potentially things like chlorine, hydrofluoric acid, and fluorine. Think about what that means for the people of Surprise and for the people who would be housed here if this were allowed to stand. If there is a tank rupture or a chemical spill or a fire, emergency responders will be responding to a potential mass casualty event involving hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are locked in and cannot get out. And I don't think we could have a better example of the problem than these tanks that are sitting right here behind us. Flammable liquid, propanol, methyl acetate. That's exactly what we are talking about. Not only has the federal government ignored the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, but the Immigration and Nationality Act requires that the federal government arrange for appropriate places for immigration detention. The Surprise warehouse is not and never will be appropriate or suitable for use as a mass detention facility. So we are asking the federal government to do something that should not be controversial. Follow the law. Conduct the required environmental reviews, communicate clearly the information from those reviews, and do not open a mass detention facility in a chemical hazard zone. The people of Surprise, the parents, the teachers, the first responders deserve better. And I know the mayor of Surprise has said that the facility is unstoppable. And the best we can hope for is a promise of better communication and some money to make up for lost tax revenue. I'm going to let this truck go by. And what I would say is you lose every battle that you choose not to fight.
That's right.
Today, the state of Arizona is choosing to fight. So I appreciate y'all being here. And now it's my honor to hand it over to Senator Catherine Miranda for a few remarks.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Assistant Leader, Senator Catherine Miranda, Legislative District 11. I want to first start off by thanking Attorney General Kris Mayes, whose leadership matters, and she continues to show it today. The people of Surprise did not sit quietly while this facility was being planned. Thousands submitted formal comments in opposition. Hundreds packed city council meeting after city council meeting. They organized, they showed up, and they spoke out. The federal government ignored them. Attorney General Mayes did not ignore them. The federal government wants to detain anywhere from 500 to 1,500 people. Warehouses are supposed to be built for businesses or storage of commercial goods, not to house human beings. This is a warehouse sitting directly across the street from a facility storing thousands of gallons of hazardous chemicals and sits 1 mile from a high school and a middle school. Now let that sink in. Hazardous, dangerous chemicals sitting 1 mile from a high school and a middle school. If there were a chemical emergency at the Ringcam facility tomorrow, before a single detainee ever arrives, it would be a crisis for this whole community. And then adding hundreds of people locked up with no ability to self-evacuate, it then becomes much, much worse. This is not how the federal government is supposed to operate. There are laws that exist precisely to prevent decisions like this one from being made in the dark, without review, without community input, and without accountability. Today, Attorney General Mayes is holding the federal government accountable under the law. I stand with her, and I stand with every person who showed up, spoke out, and refused to accept that this was a done deal. This is not a done deal. Thank you. And now I turn it over to my colleague, Senator Annalise Ortiz.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Arizona State Senator Annalise Ortiz. I have the honor of serving the people of West Phoenix and South Glendale in Arizona's 24th Legislative District. I am so proud to stand here today with Attorney General Kris Mayes in support of the lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security and ICE to block this proposed detention center. Our Attorney General is standing up for every West Valley resident who is not okay with our community being used to warehouse human beings to stuff the pockets of the private prison industry. We know that under Trump, 50 people have died in ICE custody in the past couple of years. There's been overcrowding, medical neglect, sexual assaults, suicides, and a failure to meet even basic human standards, all while private prison profiteers get richer off human suffering. It has been the deadliest era in decades for this agency under the Trump administration. We cannot let that stand. Even Mexico's foreign ministry has called these detention centers incompatible with human rights standards. That is why I organized 37 of my legislative colleagues to sign on to a letter to the Surprise City Council urging them to act, to do everything in their power to stop this facility from opening. Unfortunately, Mayor Sartor said that this was unstoppable, but as we know, that is not the case. We are going to keep fighting, and I thank the Attorney General for doing what is necessary to stand up for West Valley residents, business owners, and families who strongly oppose this human rights nightmare. We must remember that Congress has failed to create a real pathway to citizenship for people who have lived here for years and are contributing to our economy, raising families, and strengthening our communities. Arizona deserves immigration solutions that are rooted in dignity, safety, and respect for human rights and the rule of law. We will continue to stand with the people of Surprise, and thank you to every resident who is continue to organize, and those who are here today. You are inspiring. Your voices matter. Thank you for the fight that you have put up for your neighbors and for your fellow man. With that, I'm honored to welcome a Dysart High School student who is leading the way of grassroots organizing.
First, I want to thank General Mayes for standing with the students of Dysart High School and actively fighting to protect our community. You could have ignored my email, but you didn't. Thank you. My name is Callie Overs. I'm a senior and student body vice president at Dysart High School, which sits less than a mile away from here. Behind me is a massive ICE detention center that DHS quietly purchased to turn into an ICE detention center. They did it without telling a single soul in our community, not the residents, not our mayor, no one. Let me tell you what this building means for my school. Due to budget cuts, every student living within 2 miles of school is not provided with bus transportation. Hundreds of students have to walk, drive, or bike past this building every single day just to get to class. By placing this detention center within our path to school, DHS is creating unnecessary risk for thousands of children. It is reckless, irresponsible, and chaotic dangerous. As any student can tell you, before and after school is already chaotic as it is. Now we are being forced to navigate through an active federal enforcement zone with nonstop heavy traffic, prison buses, constant media attention, and protesters. Someone already tried to set the building on fire and it's not even open yet. Our student body is 60% Hispanic. Because of the recent Supreme Court decision that allows federal agents to use race and ethnicity to stop someone, students are worried about getting stopped on their way to school just because of they're Hispanic. Many students have told me they are too scared to go past this area and are switching to online classes. These are American citizens changing the course of their education because they no longer feel safe going to school anymore. That is unacceptable. I'm calling on Senators Mark Kelly, Ruben Gallego, and Representative Paul Dysart to work together and sponsor my 3-mile safety buffer zone legislation that keeps ICE detention centers 3 miles away from any K-12 school. Set aside your political differences and do the right thing for students. Not just the students at Dysart High School, but students all across the country. This is not a political issue. This is not a Democrat or Republican thing. It is the right thing. My proposal is a common sense, middle ground solution that reasonable people from both sides can agree on while keeping students safe. To everyone who cares about student safety, please stand with us and sign my petition at www.3milebuffer.com. And to Mark Kelly, Ruben Gallego, and Paul Dysart, I have sent you all emails. The students of Dysart High School and all across this country are waiting for your answer. Thank you.
Yes, Howard. So, look, I mean, it's laid out in the complaint in great detail, but it is clear from some of the government's own comments and information that they are going to have to massively retrofit this facility. If they can even accomplish that for 500 to 1,500 people, it is clear also that they that they have not done the analysis required under NEPA for a major federal action. And it's hard to imagine anything more major than turning, I guess that's the warehouse behind me, than turning that into a giant federal detention center. I mean, that automatically qualifies as being 100% a major federal action. And when the government takes major federal action and that affects the environment, clearly it would affect the environment given all of the traffic patterns, given the number of people that are going to come in here, given the retrofitting then I don't know what is. So it definitely baseline qualifies under NEPA. And then additionally, under NEPA, as you know, the government has to go through a series of processes. They have to determine, they have to do either an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement, or they have to determine that there's some sort of categorical exclusion. They've done none of that. And additionally, under NEPA, they are required to do, as a part of the EA or the EIS, a tremendous amount of community consultation. None of that happened. The city of Surprise was completely surprised by this facility. So,
Let me start with my initial question, though, which is, we fought this along the border walls and everything else. Congress says that border and immigration actions are exempt from NEPA. So what am I missing here?
well, I've got Josh Bender, one of the best lawyers in the West, behind me. I'll allow him to answer that question. But I would start with the fact that DHS itself, in I think 2021, went through NEPA and satisfied NEPA when it was retrofitting a facility in El Paso, Texas. So, maybe 5 years ago, the federal government itself acknowledged that it was required under NEPA when doing something like this. And what they did in El Paso, I think, is much less dramatic than what they're trying to do here, has to do that. Last thing I will add before I ask Josh to come up is they also have to comply with the INA. And the INA says that any federal detention center like this has to be appropriate. Well, I don't know anybody who can plausibly say that retrofitting a facility like this is an appropriate facility to house immigrants in. So, Josh, did I do a good job there, or what do you think?
Well, she did. She did answer it. The only thing I have to add is how, those arguments have already been raised to a federal district judge in Maryland who rejected those arguments and granted a preliminary injunction to the state of Maryland. And so we feel confident in those arguments. Maybe those, you're previewing what the defendants will say in this case, but we feel confident in our arguments that NEPA applies to this kind of action. And that, as the Attorney General said, the Immigration and Nationality Act and its requirements apply to this action. We look forward to proving that in court. It was not the same chemical facility, but in terms of the question that he was asking about whether NEPA applies to an immigration detention center, that same kind of issue would have applied there. But no, they didn't have a chemical storage facility right next to the proposed detention center in Maryland.
You have a chemical-related question? Okay, I'll try, Stacy. Yeah. Yeah. The major distinction is the sheer number of people who will be housed in this facility and can't get out. I mean, they'll be locked in. If this thing blows up, they will be locked in that facility with no way of getting out. And that will put tremendous pressure, obviously, on local fire departments, the local fire department, local emergency responders to deal with this. Additionally, as our complaint lays out, that facility is going to be using so much water that just to serve the detainees, that we are worried about the available water flow for fighting a potential fire that could erupt here. I mean, my God, these tanks are sitting right on the road right outside the facility. And so if you know, it's that potential for a perfect storm where you have lowered water supply because the facility is using way more water than it was permitted and designed for, plus the sheer number of people who will be in it, that makes this different. And Rincon, when it did its sort of plan that it had to submit for the Clean Air Act, did not consider the possibility of there being 1,500 people in a facility right across the street, probably because they never had any conception, who would, that the federal government would put a prison right across the street. Well, I mean, the Supremacy Clause doesn't apply to the federal government's own laws. So we are using NEPA, which is a federal law, and the Administrative Procedures Act and the INA, the Immigration Nationality Act, which absolutely can be applied to a federal action. In fact, they were designed to be applied to a federal action. Therefore, the Supremacy Clause does not hold in this situation. Now, yeah, they could make those arguments perhaps more plausibly against an action that was taken by the city. We have City Councilman Chris Judd. Thank you, Chris, for coming out here today. We had considered doing a nuisance lawsuit under state law as well. Concerns about that, obviously, under Supremacy Clause. We could have tried it. But, you know, the states that are challenging these kinds of facilities are doing it under federal law, under NEPA, the INA, and the APA. So, well, I mean, you know, I hope not. I hope not. It's always possible. We've had other cases that we've filed that obviously the tariffs case went to the Supreme Court. The birthright citizenship case went to the Supreme Court. This one could, because you now have, I think, at least 3 states that are challenging these facilities. But I just hope the federal government does the right thing and pulls back from this, pulls back from the brink. So, yeah, Craig.
How many lawsuits, like in the number I had to file against the Trump administration? What's your record? And I have a follow-up question if you count.
Yeah, sure. I believe the number is 41, Josh, 41? 41 so far, and success rate 80%. We have won essentially a TRO or some other, you know, victory, a preliminary injunction TRO in 80% of those cases, and many times the federal government just decides to drop it. Yeah, Callie?
What's it like to be here, that your voice has been heard, that you got the attention of the Attorney General of the state, and that you're making a difference for your community?
Yeah, I mean, it's stressful because senior year you're supposed to focus on the fun activities and events and going to college soon. But I mean, there are people not stepping up, the adults that are not stepping up. So I, as a leader on my campus, as a student council, like student body vice president, I felt compelled to stand up for the students that are scared and nervous for this detention center to open. Students have already started going online because of this, and it's not even operating. I think our attendance would drop immensely because students are going to have to navigate through protest and heavy traffic and whatnot. I mean, there's a bunch of students already planning to go online once it does open because majority of my school is Hispanic, and the ICE agents are allowed to racially profile, so.
But that raises the question. You talked about having flags walking by you and all the rest of it. Whether or not this becomes a full facility, you still have to play. The problem sounds like this is with the next facility. The problem is not going away no matter what the Attorney General's lawsuit says. Is that something?
Yes, you are,
She's worried about ICE presence in the community.
I'm just here to stand up for students and what they're scared of, their concerns.
Howie, can I just stay here, Callie? Stay here. Stay here. So Howie, I think what Callie was saying is that this facility and the massive ICE presence that's going along with it is scaring students already. And that you have Dysart High School, which is 60% Latino?
60%.
60% Hispanic. And students who are afraid to walk to school. When Callie wrote me a letter, and I got that letter and decided to call her. And I had a long conversation with her. I think we spent 30 minutes on the phone, and she described this for me. And it just was so impactful because you've got clearly a majority Hispanic high school with students who are being essentially terrified into not going to school. Now, I ask you, how does that make sense? How does that make sense? And it also goes to the argument that we're making in the complaint, which is that the federal government did zero research on this project into whether this was an appropriate location for a federal immigration detention facility. It goes directly to the count in our complaint about the fact that this is not an appropriate location for a federal detention facility right next to two schools. So I just also want to say how proud I am of Callie for standing up for her fellow students and her classmates.
Thank you.
She is the face of the future of this state, and we should really be glad for her willingness to stand up and speak out and do what is the American way, which is to fight for what you believe in publicly.
Hello.
Yeah, I mean, I just had a really good conversation with Kris. I know there's multiple council members who do have concerns about the facility. Our staff has been in contact with city staff about this situation. We are looking forward to also essentially working together to get information, as the lawsuit progresses. And so I think we're going to do that, and we're going to have a good collegial relationship as the lawsuit progresses. Yeah. I have not spoken with the mayor yet, no. But then again, I have not tried, so that's probably on me. I don't know if our staff reached out to the mayor yet, or no? Okay. But we definitely have been in touch with the city, and they've been obviously dealing with this. They went out to Washington, D.C. to make their concerns known, and I think that's terrific. But obviously, we're in the best position at the Attorney General's office to take on this litigation on behalf of the state of Arizona, because this is an issue of regional importance and statewide importance.
One more.
No more? Oh, one more? Okay. Cameron. Yeah, I mean, I think that the concern is that you could potentially have an explosion, especially as the amount of traffic here expands exponentially, because you're going to have, thousands of people coming into this facility, ICE employees, actual detainees, family members visiting the detainees, workers, construction workers, the amount of construction workers that Garda World, which I believe is the entity that set up what's it called? Alligator Alcatraz, as if we need that in the state of Arizona. So as Garda World begins to bring in all of these trucks and whatnot, obviously the potential for mayhem and disaster increases. Again, look where it's parked. Look at all the traffic. I mean, Exhibit A in our lawsuit, okay, right behind us at this press conference. So those are the kinds of things. The other thing I want to point out that is probably a little bit under discussed is the sewage issue. So this thing is not plumbed for 1,500 human beings. It is not prepared for 1,500 human beings. We lay this detail out in our complaint, and I think there's a real possibility that sewage could overflow into the community, into these streets. Again, our students would have to deal with that going to school. The community would have to deal with that, and the environment would have to deal with that. So those are all real issues, I think, in play.
You brought us all out to a hazardous site.
We'll get you out of here right away, Howard, right away. But I mean, it's interesting. You got to admit, you got to see it to believe it. That is for sure. So.